All right, everyone, so we have a lot of projects to make in this course, but I want to start with this simple, easy one. We're basically just going to do some heavy smoke emitting out of this statue. So you can use any 3D model that you would like. You can just Google, free statue. You can also use this technique for any kind of a dry ice effects for soft drinks, commercials. So basically, after I imported my model, I just made it an editable poly. And again, I selected the polygons that I wanted the smoke to be coming out of, which is this ball here. And I set the ID to 10. So then, as we've done before, I'm just gonna create a Phoenix source. And I'm gonna make this whole statue the emitter. The outgoing velocity, we can maybe do something like 1.5 meters. And the temperature, so 300 would be basically neutral temperature. It would behave as if there's no gravity basically, and the smoke would just stay in place. Anything above 300, so let's say 500, it would rise. And anything below 300, it would go down. So we're just gonna make it 10. And that will basically make the smoke fall to the ground. And before we forget, let's go under the polygon ID and set the ID to 10. Next, we need to create a grid. So I'm gonna keep using the shortcuts on this toolbar. So let's enable auto grid. And I know that the smoke is gonna be pushed to the left. So I'm gonna make the grid like this to give it some room. And under grid, we can just lower the Z. And we know that we want the smoke to be bouncing off the floor. So I'm gonna set Z as jammed minus, and we can give it a bunch of resolutions. So maybe something like 0.05 meters should work. Under dynamics, we don't really need any cooling. So I'm gonna keep all these values at 0. Verticity, we can leave where it is. For the quality, maybe I would do something like 40. So this will just help you get more of the nicer detail, especially further on in the simulation. Under output, as always, just select where you want to save the simulation and output velocity for motion blur. And let's just run the simulation because I always try to run the sim as soon as I can to make sure that I am emitting smoke and everything is working as it should. So we have some smoke being emitted. We see that it's being pushed to the ground. That's good. We can go under preview and enable the GPU preview here. So we already have something that's pretty cool. And now we're just gonna make it sort of cooler from here. So we know we need to push the smoke to the left. So for that, I'm gonna do a plane force. And again, I'm gonna use the shortcut here, but you can also go under helpers, Phoenix FD, and create a plane force and rotate it 90 degrees in the direction that you want, and let's set the strength to 5. So I'm running the sim and everything's working nicely. We're getting some nice smoke simulation happening. What I did in my example, I actually added some turbulence just to break up the smoke a bit more. So we can go under, again, helpers, Phoenix FD, and create a PHX turbulence and just give it a little bit of turbulence. So maybe I would do strength 25 with 2 meter size. And I'll just add a bit more random detail as well. What you could also do if you wanted it to be more sort of chaotic is go under dynamics and play with the vorticity. So we could maybe increase the smoke surface vorticity to something like 0.5. And we could increase the randomized amount to maybe 1. Now, one thing that I want you to be aware of that you might not know about is that the plane force has this apply force behind icon checkbox. So right now, everything that's on the right would be considered behind icon. So if I am to move the plane force icon over here and run the sim, you can see that the plane force is actually not having any effect because right now the smoke is technically behind the icon. So you need to check apply force behind icon in order for it to affect the smoke everywhere. So now that I enabled it, you can see the smoke is being pushed and the smoke is a lot more broken up than it was before. So at this point, this is entirely up to your personal taste. I think that it's a bit too broken up. I kind of like that symmetrical smoke wave. So I'm gonna go back into dynamic settings and make the random amount, maybe just something like 0.1, and set the smoke surface vorticity back to 0.3. And run the sim one more time to see what our sort of final look will be. So I really like the way this is looking. It's not too uniform. There's a nice sort of breakage of the smoke and some nice swirls and detail, but at the same time, it's not too crazy at the same time. So this is very close to what my initial render was. Now, what I think would be really cool is if the person was actually walking and carrying this sphere of smoke above his head. And you could even maybe make this ball invisible and make it look like he's carrying just the smoke, which might be super cool. So I've seen a lot of cool effects on Instagram where maybe a character is walking and he's emitting smoke as he walks. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Mixamo. It's now owned by Adobe and it provides a ton of free animation files basically that you can download. So I'm just gonna download, maybe let's search for something like running. And let's download this one. And you can just hit download and say format, FBX. And I'm gonna delete this example for now. And what I found is that the Mixamo characters are in centimeters as far as scale. So it's best if you go under customize unit setup and make sure that you're under metric centimeters. 1 unit is 1 centimeter. And then you can just drag your download FBX into Max and say import file, and it'll import the character for you, and it has the animation still, so it's running forward. And you can just straight up say, you know, select the Phoenix source, remove the statue that we had before, and make sure that your polygon ID is 1 because we're not really using that anymore. And you can just click add and add the whole character. And then we just need to create a new grid to cover the entire running path. So let's just do another fire and smoke sim. And I'm just gonna plug in the settings back in there real quick. So we did 0 for cooling. And then under grid, maybe let's just lower the resolution a little bit and set the Z to jammed minus. And since the character is moving pretty fast, I'm gonna set the steps per frame to 3 just to make sure we capture all that. And let's run the simulation and see what this looks like. All right, so I'm running the sim and this is looking pretty cool. I think this could give you a ton of ideas for the kind of stuff that you can do. So we have this running character emitting smoke. You can go back into the source and emit more smoke. So we could maybe set the outgoing velocity to something like 50. And you could even maybe go back into the settings and go under dynamics and set the smoke buoyancy to maybe -2 just to push the smoke downward even more. Right now, we can still see the character under the smoke. So you could actually click on it and go to object properties and make it display as box. And then you could right click again, go to Phoenix FD properties and make it not a solid object. So this way the smoke will actually not bounce off of the geometry and they'll give you a different kind of effect. So I'm gonna run the sim one more time and show you what this looks like. All right, so we're getting something slightly different, but still pretty cool. You can see characters running, the smoke is falling down due to the higher buoyancy, and then the character stops. And what you could do here is maybe just increase the dissipation so that once the character stops, the smoke will just disappear, which may look pretty cool. So I hope that this is giving you some ideas for some cool effects that you can do. Definitely have fun with it. I always love to see what you guys come up with, and I'll see you in the next lesson.